3, 2, 1. MLS Aces Podcast. This is your host, Tom Sweezy. We got episode 304 with Jason Vevang. Jason, it is a glorious work day. It is a glorious day to be stressed out with the 9 to 5. But other than that, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. We got MLS tonight. For people, it was yesterday, I guess. We got, I guess, a double match week, so that's fun. I mean,
no, exactly. Like, I think this is the fun time of the year to me. I love the playoffs. I love
the race to the playoffs. Like this,
exactly right.
Awesome.
Like,
also the Fire got a win, so I'm in a great mood.
I mean, Fire did get a win. New York City now winless in 8. Or that's fun. It's like 8 or 9 or something like that. I'm not even trying to count anymore.
It's getting real dicey for them here if they can hold on to this spot. But
bro, these playoff races are crazy. And I think that's what a majority of this podcast episode is going to be about. We're gonna dive high level into some things. We're obviously gonna talk about a lot of results from the weekend because, just for listeners' sake, it is Wednesday early afternoonish, so we can't talk about the Wednesday night games, but we can give some thoughts into what we're looking at right now and maybe what the future schedule of all these teams looks like and everything like that. This one doesn't fall so nicely into the scope of the conversation, but I feel like we should just start with it and get it out of the way. Not because it's not important, but it's more for 2025. But San Diego FC, they've hired their first ever manager in club history in Mikey Varas. The 41-year-old Varas has most recently, obviously, if you've been following U.S. soccer in the last few months, weeks, years, whatever, he's been most recently the interim U.S. men's national team manager, where he did lose to Canada and draw to New Zealand. Prior to being an interim manager, he was an assistant under Greg Berhalter for a little over a year. And then previous to that, he was the US U20 manager, who he did have a really successful run with the U20s, winning the CONCACAF U20 championship, winning 11 of his 20 games as a manager. Before that, he was an assistant at FC Dallas underneath Luigi Gonzalez, and he was also an academy coach under Dallas and Sacramento Republic, where he began his coaching career. Jason, San Diego now have their general manager. They now have their manager, Irving Lozano's killing it in the Eredivisie right now. We can keep this super short. I don't think we have too much to dive into, but what's your take on Varas and what's your take on San Diego, I guess, heading into year one, which is closer than we think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, like you just said, they have a GM now, they have a manager, they have a star player coming in. Now they can continue to build a roster with all that in mind. And I think that, in my opinion, is the right way to do it. I always say, like, even if you're already an active team and you're trying to rebuild or do whatever, the coach matters, and I think we've seen some MLS teams who get a lot of players and then decide on the coach. And I honestly think that's backwards a little bit.
Yeah,
it can work and it has worked, but I like this way of building. And as far as the man, like Varas himself, there's experience there. There's a lot of experience working with and around MLS and US soccer, which I think is a positive. I don't personally, like, I haven't watched a ton of his managed games, but I do think I just like the way they are going about this creation, I guess, of their team. And I think knowing these, this is the coach, this is how he wants to play, he can get into the room right now and start saying, I like this type of player. I like, with Lozano, what can we add? What does he want to add? And really build out the roster with like a clear vision in mind. And I think a little bit like St. Louis sort of did this too, with the fact that they had a lot of their guys together a year before. A little bit different because they kind of got some time actually playing games. But I think there's a positive to being able to build with like a clear vision, which is what I feel like they're doing.
I agree. I don't know. the Greg Berhalter assistant tree to getting their whether their first or I mean most of them it's been their first shot at a full-time first team club managerial role hasn't been great. Luchi Gonzalez, Nico Estevez, BJ Callahan is
I don't know that might be too early to call.
No. I was about to say BJ Callahan, too early to tell.
Inherited a pretty bad team.
Yeah, he's still trying to figure out his team and everything like that for not even it hasn't even been half a season for him. So I'm not saying I'm out on Mikey Varas, but I have my concerns. I have my concerns with the way Berhalter's assistants have translated to Major League Soccer. I think maybe the one caveat, the one difference, and it's the Right to Dream Academy owning San Diego FC, right? They clearly have their style. It's almost similar to a City Football Group, Red Bull Group, kind of coming in and owning a club in Major League Soccer. They have their style and how they want to play, how they like to play, the way that they develop, the way they find talent, the way they do everything in between, right? So that's the only difference to me, that clearly this larger organization went through an evaluation process, went with Varas, and they trust him to be the guy. Now we still have to see the results on the field, but those are just my only hesitations, my only concerns. But I'm a pessimist at heart, so that's.
I think just the biggest thing is, regardless of who they get, I think doing it early on before filling out a roster is the right.
I can agree with that.
I agree that the results. Well, that's what we're gonna have to see, right?
Yeah.
Is he good at this? And that answer could be no. But I do think going about it the way they have, in the order that they have, is actually a pretty good way to do it.
I can agree. And look, I don't want to spend too much time on San Diego FC. We'll have an off season to chat about them.
We can talk about them as they build their team out.
We'll give them their love and their hate as it comes, just like we do every other MLS club, right? But let's keep it moving. Let's stay in the state of California and LAFC. I mean, the results have been a little dicey, and we'll dive into an El Trafico result from over the weekend. But they made some news. They made some headlines by announcing that they re-signed club legend and free agent, which is the important part here, Carlos Vela, through the end of the 2024 MLS season with the club option for 2025. The former MLS MVP now joins an attack of Dennis Bouanga, Olivier Giroud, Christian Oliveira, Mateus Bogusz, and Kai Kamara. Just a laundry list of super talented players. Look, after losing the Leagues Cup final to Columbus, it hasn't been great for LAFC. Yes, they beat Seattle on a 1-0 PK. It was a PK goal by Bouanga to make the U.S. Open Cup final, and they have a chance to take home a trophy, take home a spot they already have the spot for Champions Cup, but you get it. Ultimately, I think LAFC are trying to get back on the path towards an MLS Cup in 2024 and making the final again, and not just making it, but winning it. I think the addition of Carlos Vela only helps that. I don't know how much he's actually going to be able to bring, but what were your thoughts when you initially saw, Carlos Vela back LAFC?
I think it's just adding another piece to their attack, kind of like you're saying. Like, does he have 90 minutes in him? I don't think so, but does he have a really solid 30? Maybe. And I think that's kind of where this is. Or does he have a really solid extra time? Like, there's going to be moments where his experience, his knowledge of this team too. Like, it's not that long ago that he was the one leading this team to trophies. His confidence in big games, I think those are all things that they're looking for. I personally think that LAFC is trying to get back to actually winning trophies because not making or just making the finals is not good enough, I think, for them. And I think what they've clearly set out to do from the very beginning is win trophies, become this major name in U.S. soccer, in this region, in just world soccer in some sense. And so this feels like a move where I know we're going to talk about them as like how their season's going, and towards the playoffs, but I do think this move is kind of like let's get a guy in the locker room who's won trophies with us, who has led this team, who's been an MVP, breaking records essentially with the team. So it's just a little bit it's obviously not a starter level player, but I don't think that's what they need in that sense. Like you just read off a list of names that are like all these guys are in. Some of those guys are already bench players. Kai Kamara coming off the bench is another like very experienced guy, and I think that's just what LAFC is trying to do.
I think. Look, I like the move. I think, I'm not the first person to sit here and say this, but if he can almost act like as what Ilsinho was doing for the Philadelphia Union a few years ago of being a super sub, like you said, Jason, can he give you a really solid 20 to 30 minutes in every single game that he plays? If he can, then I think this is only an addition for LAFC to continue to be a dominant club and make another final. My only devil's advocate play here that I've really been thinking of when you were talking was like, is this just though like not advancing forward? Is this just trying to rely on the past and past success and past players and Carlos Vela another year older to try to overcome that? I can see the argument for yes for that and no for that, but ultimately my only concern is like this team needs to just beat the track record that they've gained. And if they win MLS Cup and they win US Open Cup, then I think they will do that. But I ultimately think, and maybe we can talk a little bit grander about LAFC season here, if LAFC don't win MLS Cup, even if they win US Open Cup, is it a failure of a season for them? I'm leaning towards yes.
They will be disappointed. I think. Depending on who. Yeah, I mean, if I was going into the season, and I think it just is because it's LAFC, it would be a failure. So yeah, I would. I don't know why I made that harder than it was, because I'm thinking like if like the Fire won US Open Cup and didn't do anything else, I would consider that a good season. But that's a whole different mentality. So I think like it in LAFC sense, just winning US Open Cup, which is not a guarantee, it's still going to have to. It's still going to be a tough game, but
game still has to play.
Yeah, but. Yeah, I would say, well, I don't know. It's so tough, man. It's so tough to be like them losing MLS Cup is a failure of a season because only 2 teams can even make that far, right?
I consider it a failure only because of the bar that LAFC has set for themselves. We're starting to see it in Major League Soccer where we talked about it all season long, Jason, right? That we think that there is a 5 or 6 dominant level of club, right?
It might be even lower. It might be lower.
I'm not even saying
more like 4.
I'm not even saying on the field. I'm saying like to a standard of how you want a club to operate.
Okay, then I would 5 or 6.
4 to 6. We'll go 4 to 6. But ultimately, I think LAFC are clearly 1 or 2 on that list of how you want your club to operate, the expectations that you hold them to and they hold themselves to. So I think yes, another season where let's just say they in a fantasy world, they make MLS Cup and lose, they made Campeones Cup and lose, and they win US Open Cup. I think going 1 for 3 in finals, this is the reality of MLS that we're in, that is a failure of a season for LAFC. Again, no offense to my club, your club. If either of our clubs did that, they went 1 for 3 in finals, we're partying. It's just a different standard that clubs are in right now. So I think that would be a failure of a season. But
I don't know. I think there's a reason that we've talked about LAFC and people hate hearing about them, but you have to keep talking about them.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's virtually since they've joined the league, you've had to talk about them. They've been in the conversation, and they're going to still be in that conversation because that's the bar they set, because they've come out and said they want to win trophies and they want to win a lot of them, and they've made it to finals. They've done a pretty good job of it. I think you're probably right. It is sort of a failure if they come out this season having played in if they make MLS Cup, what's that, 4 finals this year?
It would be 3. US Open Cup, MLS Cup, Campeones Cup. That's it, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, whatever.
Right? Yeah. Whatever. Still, doesn't matter. Yes.
No, never mind. Anyway,
you have Columbus on the mind, Jason. You think dominance, you just have Columbus right there.
I'm struggling. Anyway, I just think, if the only trophy they win is the U.S. Open Cup, I do think that's probably a failure. As much as we support the U.S. Open Cup, like I wouldn't put it on the same level as some of those others. So
it's not. Ultimately, I think it's a great competition and tournament that should continue to happen, and every MLS team should be involved. But the tournament does need to change. The competition does need to change, and it is not at the same level.
I think,
Yeah,
I think we talk about the Galaxy and LAFC as a bigger conversation.
I was gonna say let's move it forward. So LAFC are coming off of a monster El Trafico loss this past weekend to the LA Galaxy 4-2. LAFC were up 2-0, and then in the 75 minutes after their first two goals, they were up 2-0, feeling good, riding high. They allow 4 straight goals, lose 4-0. And I think this is where we can pivot the conversation to the LA Galaxy, who now, after that win, seriously take complete control in the Western Conference. 55 points. They're up 7 points on LAFC in that Western Conference. They've secured an official playoff spot with this win. And I mean, ultimately, Jason, do you think the Galaxy, after this game, have proven themselves to be MLS Cup contenders? Because to call ourselves out, we never really talk about them in the same light that we do LAFC.
I think there's a reason for that, personally. I don't think they've had a sustained success, so I don't think they can be in that light yet. But I don't know. I go back and forth, and I think I was more negative on this team from the beginning. I kind of want to look at where I had them and where we had them predicted.
I'll look at it if you want to pull it up. If you want,
I got it. You had them 10th. I had them 7th. But yeah, I think a lot of the moves they've made have really paid off. I think Puig, again, is just like, I don't know how we don't talk about him more at this point. Like, the guy is so good. Royce was obviously a good guy to bring in there.
I think Royce has adjusted way, just really quickly on him, he's adjusted way better than I thought he would. I didn't know.
He's asked to do less than probably he's ever needed to do, right?
100%. I just didn't know how Vanny was going to work him in. And then once we even got that, like, okay, he's not going to expect him to be a game in, game out starter and play all these minutes and all this shit. Like, I didn't even expect him to be as productive as he has been, but he has looked great with Puig on the field at the same time.
Credit to him. Like, obviously, he's a super classy guy. For his whole career, he's been nothing but professional. It's a lot to come into an LA Galaxy team and just buy into the role that they want for him. And he's done that. As a superstar for years, he's done that. So credit to him there. I personally think that it's still – I don't know, man. I go so back and forth on this team. I personally don't think I would put them MLS Cup contender and like who I actually think can win it. I feel like are different things, because are they a contender? Kind of. Do I think they're going to win it? No.
Okay. How about more fair question? Do you see them as a realistic team that can make it out of the Western Conference? Like, will be the representative from the Western Conference?
Yeah, but I only say that because I think there's probably 2 teams that I would say that for, and it's the both LA teams.
And that's where I was going in my brain too. Of I think if the Galaxy were in the Eastern Conference, it's a different story. I think the Galaxy being in the Western Conference, there is an absolute clear path for them to.
Yeah, like when you lay it out, like can they get out of the West? It's a little bit easier of an answer. Because,
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a drop off. Let's be honest. The West has a bigger drop off. The East has a drop off, but there's more teams in that top tier. Where I think in the West there's a bigger drop off where you can kind of, and maybe not points wise, but after LAFC, I do feel like the quality goes down a little bit.
There's 3 teams in the Western Conference that I can see legitimately making it to MLS Cup. It's the 2 LA teams, and we'll talk about a third in a little bit. I don't want to derail the conversation away from the Galaxy, because the Galaxy, I think, are true contenders to be, in MLS Cup, especially if Puig continues to be the best 11 quality midfielder he has been. He had a goal and 2 assists.
There's no reason to expect him not to.
Exactly, right?
Like he's done this for years, years.
Yes, and I think Marco Royce, impactful off the bench, whether he needs to start a game or whatever. But I think the key is a healthy Dejan Joveljic. He came back healthy. He scored a brace. He was ready to play in this one. He was balling out, and I think him alongside Peck and Ponceal, I mean, like, that is maybe the most dangerous attacking three.
Very good people that they brought in,
Yes,
right?
exactly, right? And
They
can we
hit
just
on all these.
can we, before we move on, can we just give 30 seconds of love to Edwin Cerrillo for that fucking banger he had? He literally, he hit that thing top corner with absolute class. No one was expecting it. I don't even think he was expecting it. But I put this out on Twitter after he scored that. You could tell that once he like processed what just happened, he felt like he had like, you know, this is not maybe the most not polite PC
I
thing
don't
in
know
the
what you're
world.
about to say.
He thought he had like the biggest balls in the world. Like
Oh.
you could tell like the swagger he had. He was feeling it a little bit. Like you could just see it in his face and his body language. So I just want to give Edwin Cerrillo the love because he has been a very underrated 6 all season long. He's been playing very well for the Galaxy, and that goal was just unbelievable, especially in El Trafico. I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous. Jason, anything else about either of these LA teams before we keep it moving?
No.
All right, let's go to another matchup, another very important matchup in the Western Conference standings. And this is where my third team comes in that I think can make it out of the Western Conference, Jason. Houston Dynamo with a monster win over Real Salt Lake, and they continue to make the Western Conference standings very, very interesting. The Dynamo took down RSL 4-1 behind 4 different goal scorers. And once again, I think showing that they play dominant team style soccer under Ben Olsen. Mikael, once again, fantastic on the back line, you know, handling things steadily with Arango and everything like that RSL threw at him. And I think he's bolstering his resume for a 2024 Defensive Player of the Year campaign, but that's just me. But I think outside of what Houston did really well and Coco Carrasquilla slotting in and coming back healthy and him looking like the 2023 version of himself and Aliu continuing to ball out and everyone in between, right? The major concern from this game is Hector Herrera leaving at halftime with an injury. I think there is still some question marks about how much time he will miss, but there are reports out there from trusted sources that I see that are, expecting him to miss about a month, which does suck. But the team did just sign Junior Moreno from free agency, and Moreno was part of that 2023 FC Cincinnati
That
Supporting
wouldn't
Shield
put him
squad.
out of the playoffs either, though. He would be
What'd
back
you say?
for that. He would be back for the.
He would be back, but it's
back with probably a week or 2, maybe.
I just think it's right. Like, you want to keep Houston pushing for a home playoff spot.
Yeah.
Ache is the linchpin to doing that. He's out. How are they going to adjust? And then even when he is back, is he going to be fully fit enough to put in 90-minute shifts in the MLS Cup playoffs, which is the most pivotal time of the year? You know. So, what are your thoughts on Houston?
Well, I want to I'll give away like what my pick for game tonight is, which is the Houston game versus Vancouver. I think it doesn't really matter if I pick a game for tonight anyways. By the time people listen to
it's between you and me. Don't you worry. Forget
but either way, like that game has massive implications. And I think the way, like the bigger picture for Houston, the way the results fell over the past weekend was huge for them. That win is massive because they're now looking they're looking at a potential like 2 or 3 seed. I think probably more 3 seed, but still
3 or 4. That's a home playoff spot, baby. That's it.
Reachable. You're talking a difference of 3 points at this point for them. I think that's massive. I think Houston as a whole, we've seen what they can do at their highest level, right? Last year, Ben Olsen's got this team. I was a huge doubter. I'll say it. I think we both were. I think a lot of people were.
Yeah.
But what they've been able to do when fully healthy has been awesome. And I think, like you said, Coco Carrasquilla coming back, the injury to Ache is tough. But I think he's one of those players that as long as he can come back and get to that fitness level that he needs to be, I don't think it's like he's going to be really rusty right away, right? Like I feel like he's one of those guys that you can kind of bring back at any point and he's going to be successful. So I do think if this team can manage health this end of the season, manage going into the playoffs, they would be the one I would fear the most outside of the LA teams. And I think they could get a home playoff game at this point.
That is why I think I have them as my dark horse, and they're not even that much of a dark horse, but that's why I have them as my third team outside of the two LA squads to make it to MLS Cup. That's no shot at Vancouver, Seattle, Colorado, all playing great soccer right now. All of those teams are very good. I just, I don't know, something in my gut, something in my brain is just telling me Houston should be above them in contendership, right?
If they were going away to, let's just say, Colorado, I still would probably have a decent amount of confidence in Houston.
I would have confidence
as long as they can avoid the two LA teams in the first round, which should be reachable for them right now. I mean, that's tough, but it's tight. I think RSL might be the unlucky team here.
I want to ask you super quickly. We don't have to dive too deep into RSL because last week when we did our hour and a half long kind of catch up on things, we did have concerns of RSL.
Yeah.
But do you think at this point, especially after that 4-1 loss to Houston, that RSL, that summer transfer window ruined the 2024 campaign for them?
I think you could argue also the suspension to Chicho Arango hurt them. But yeah, I think the fact of the matter is, coming out of that, the moves they made, whether they work or not, are not having immediate impact, which is what they need in a season where you're fighting for a title. Yeah. So, like, we were talking about this team, like they could win Supporter Shield, and they're way off of it now. They might not even get a home playoff game. So, yeah, I would agree. They probably did have that. Missing that transfer window kind of fucked them. Yeah, I'll say it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It is what it is. I was one that was speaking as highly of RSL as many others were out there. They are.
I still think they're a tough team to play. I still think they're going to be a tough out. I just, at this point, they're probably, like, you want to be peaking as you go into the playoffs, and I would say they're probably playing the worst they have all year going into the playoffs, right?
That's
the
concern
because you also have teams like Colorado who's still playing good, like Seattle who's suddenly, playing very well.
Great, yeah.
Vancouver, Houston, we just mentioned, they're playing good. I think a lot of these teams are starting to hit, end of season quality form, where it almost feels like RSL is the only team going in reverse out of the teams competing for this.
Honestly, yeah. No, and I agree. I think RSL, they have a lot of their stars that got them to this point not playing in the same form. And to continue your point of other teams in the West playing well, Jason, I'm just going to scroll down on the notes a little bit just to wrap this up for a nice little transition of just Minnesota United. I think even last week, you and I had our concerns whether they'd be in a play-in game or not or whatever, but they had a big road win against St. Louis. Dallas, they were the team on the bye last week. Austin lost, Portland losing. I think Minnesota United with a big win last week. I wouldn't say this is a secured their spot 100%.
Well, especially with Cincinnati tonight.
Yeah, wild things have happened before, but I think Minnesota are now in a spot where they control their own destiny way more than I thought they would at any point, to be perfectly honest with you. Kelvin Yeboah has been fantastic. He scored last game off of a PK. Dane St. Clair's balling out. He had 7 saves last game. I don't know. I'm not saying Minnesota secured playoff spot. They haven't really beat any great teams, but when you pick up the wins at this late part of the season, it's also securing it's also helping you secure your spot for, a potential run and everything like that. Again, it's for a play-in spot. You're most likely playing one of the LA teams, but still, if
they win, right? You still got to win the play-in. But
exactly. Yes.
I think they've put them. There's a little more separation there than there was, a week ago for that play-in game. I think Dallas, they have Salt Lake tonight.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that'll be an interesting game. That'll be very telling. If Salt Lake loses that game, I'd be much more concerned at that point. Vancouver has, or Minnesota has Cincinnati, like you said. So it'll be interesting to see where they come out after tonight. But I still think the little kind of bump they built there with 5 points is huge for them, especially they have Kansas City this weekend. So.
I agree. Some tough matchups for these borderline teams this this midweek and heading into the weekend and everything like that. But we've talked a lot of West. Let's jump over to the East. And for listeners or viewers, if you haven't caught on already, last week was super long. We're trying to do a little bit of a shorter one this week for you guys.
But I think next week we're going to have a very much clearer picture. Hopefully.
Yes.
Or it could be way more confusing. But
I mean, look, I think ultimately every single week should be a little bit clear, but
with less games to play, it's a little easier to figure out where things stand. But.
Exactly. I do think MLS surprises us at times, though, and we do end up more confused at points, but it's why we love it, right? The Eastern Conference, Inter Miami, they continue to dominate in results, even though I don't think Miami, with the eye test, played great soccer, but I think at the end of the day, a 3-1 win over the Philadelphia Union is huge. But I think the even bigger thing, and we talked about it a little bit last week as well, Lionel Messi back on the field. Did not expect him to start, but he does start for the first, starts and plays for the first time for Miami in about 2 months since he got injured in that Copa America final. But Messi scores a brace, records an assist. Miami win 3-1. And I mean, this is why Inter Miami are the best team in MLS, points wise right now. This is why they are going to potentially break the single season points record, and why Inter Miami should be considered for every trophy they're going to play for because of, the little Argentine man running around the field and Lionel Messi. Jason, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about the return of Messi or what you're expecting or thinking of Miami right now, but that was I think the result matters less than Messi's return,
Well, I think Miami's in a funny position here because they just beat Philly. They've got Atlanta. They play Toronto. They play Charlotte, and they play NYCFC. So they can be kind of like spoilers here or pick and choose almost who they end up going against in the playoffs. It's not like that's not an easy schedule, but it's still Miami. Like you said, Messi coming back. I think both of us, when we talked about it, we're like, oh, maybe he'll get 30 minutes. I didn't expect him to come in and immediately have 2 goals, but it is Messi, right? Like at this point, how do you doubt the guy? So he's coming in at the right time. They have 6 more games left, 7 more games left, something like that.
I think 6, yeah. So, I mean, look. The big question that I wrote in the notes, I already asked you in text message, but I'm going to say it for the show. Do you think Messi should be in the best 11 conversation? You and I and a few of the former MLS Aces podcast hosts and team members and everything like that, we're working through our preliminary votes for the season end kind of voting and awards and all of that. I will say I personally put him in my vote for, one of the best 5 wingers in MLS this season. I mean, the dude is right now currently tied for 3rd in all of Major League Soccer with 28 goal contributions. He's tied with Chicho Arango and just 1 goal contribution back from Evander and Lucho Acosta. He's also played about 1,000 less minutes than, all of those guys that I just named pretty much. So I think even in limited minutes, this dude is just absolutely playing at a different level and a reason why Miami are in the chances of breaking a single season points record. But I want to hear your take.
Yeah, I think originally when I was filling that out, I didn't put Messi in. I don't know. It's hard for me to put someone in who's missed essentially like a half the season.
It's fair.
Not quite half. But when you put it, just lay it out like you have, with 28 goal contributions in 1,000 minutes, 1,100 minutes. And then you have Arango, who I think at the beginning of the season for a long time, we were saying MVP season for him. And he's played, 800 more minutes. It's kind of telling. It's hard, right? Like, I want to say, no, he shouldn't be in it because of the time missed. But at the same time, with what he's doing, with the time he's played, it's insane. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to do this math, but that's a goal contribution every probably 60 minutes. It's incredible. I think there's a good chance he could end up first on this list. A very good chance.
There's a chance he wins Golden Boot. That's the realistic thing right now.
I think in that sense, you have to. And I would probably, if I were doing it again, or when we do our final, It's going to be tough to leave him off it, especially.
It depends on if you just scored a brace or not the week before. But yes,
I think it depends on when we do it, in how many games are left or whatever, and if he continues, right? Like, I don't, like, again, I'm not going to doubt the guy. It's the best player of ever. So
Period.
Yeah, I think he should be on best 11 if he's going to lead the league. Like, I would like to look back on every MLS year and see when the Golden Boot leader didn't make best 11, right? And then in that sense, you just put him in.
Exactly. Look,
I told you in text, I was like, I don't know if I can do it. Talking about it now, I will. But I also said, like, there's no world where he's not a best 11 player.
But I didn't even expect him to start a game for the rest of the regular season. I'll be perfectly honest. I expected him to just
start towards the end, but I didn't think he was going to start right away.
I don't know. I just was like, they want to save him. They don't want to run him 90 minutes constantly. They want to whatever. But I'm wrong. Tata Martino's right. You're right. And here we are. And now if he's starting every single game for the rest of the regular season, there is a great chance that he's Golden Boot leader, goal contribution leader, and best 11.
What's crazy is if this team, they basically have supporter shield, right? If they end up breaking the record for points, if he ends up Golden Boot or leading the league in goal contributions, I don't know how you don't put him as like MVP. Like, that's even hard. And I don't know, man. That's tough. But think about that. You just have a guy who, on the best team, who essentially in this fantasy world broke the record for points in a season.
Yeah.
Leads the league in goal contributions. I don't know, man. It's tough because of the time missed, but I don't see how you forget about those things.
If Miami breaks the points record, they win.
What's funny was I was like anti putting him on best 11 now.
And now you're like, Tom, he is the MVP. If they break the points record, if they win supporter shield, if Messi wins Golden Boot and he is the goal contributions leader at the end of the season, and
if he wins Golden Boot, he will be the goal contribution leader. I personally think, because that means he gets at least 3-4 more goals, assuming Benteke doesn't get any more.
I was going to say he has to keep up with what Benteke does, and I was going to say and Benteke has to fall off, and Lucho Acosta.
They don't necessarily have to fall off. He just has to outscore them, which is not crazy. Sure. It's not unheard of.
I think if Lucho Acosta breaks the 20 assist mark, there is a very difficult chance that he is not the back-to-back MVP. I think it's more falling on Lucho Acosta's shoulders than it is Christian Benteke's, but I agree with you.
But you could we could go into our podcast next week. That's 2 games played versus Atlanta and then versus, I think, NYCFC. Or whatever they call him nowadays.
Yeah. Right? Whatever the team's name is.
There's a good chance he could have like 5 more assists and 2 more goals or something. Like,
there is. I'm not going to deny it. I just think that there's going to be people out there that, see Lucho Acosta and see more minutes played and are going to be like, I can't give it to a guy who's only played 1,300 minutes.
I agree. Shit. I think when you look at the minutes played, it's both an argument for and
against, 100%.
And I'm usually on the against side. So when it's so absurd, it's really hard to do, man.
Jason, I see a blue and white jersey sticking out from underneath your shirt right now. I see the Argentina fan showing out in you.
It's not even that. It's just the fact is, when he plays, they win. Is essentially what it boils down to it.
That is very fair. I think there's a lot of arguments for and against Messi being best 11 MVP, whatever you want to consider it.
I brought it up either. Let's just move on.
Let's just see how the next few weeks shape out before we start, I think, awarding him. I want to keep this next conversation a little short, just in the presence of time. Right. But you have the Union, who, like we just mentioned a while back now in this conversation, just lost to Miami 3-1. Andre Blake missed this game and could potentially miss more. He does have a slight knock from international duty, which is an absolute killer to them. The Red Bulls dropped points to Chicago. NYCFC drew DC. Charlotte losing to CF Montreal. Orlando and Toronto, though, picking racking up big time wins at this point of the year. What's your current state on the Eastern Conference? I think we can safely say, and like we said last week, and like we've been saying, that Miami, Cincy, Columbus, they're home playoff spots, right? But with poor results for the most part across these mid-block, teams in the Eastern Conference, do you have a feeling at this point who you're leaning towards who's getting that fourth spot, that final home playoff spot, and kind of how things are shaping out in your brain?
Oh man, I think I will know after tonight because I think it might be Orlando or Charlotte. I think whoever wins their game tonight. That I didn't even think they were playing tonight, and then I just saw that, and
that is a huge matchup.
I didn't even realize, like when I said earlier the other Vancouver, or did I say Vancouver? Yeah, Vancouver, Houston. I think Orlando and Charlotte might be the game of the night, but I personally would probably pick one of them. I think I talked a lot about Philly in the last couple weeks and how I thought they were going to be the team. But if Andre Blake, and I'm very clear about this, when Andre Blake plays, I think they could be the team in the play-in. But without him, I don't think they will. If he misses, 2-3 games, I think that's too big of a hole.
Yeah.
DC and Toronto keeps rolling, man. Like Toronto, I think might stay up. But yeah, I would probably put Orlando in my 4th spot if I had to pick right now. And
I think Orlando
is massive.
I think Orlando take the Charlotte matchup tonight. I think Orlando, they've been in the best form of Orlando, Charlotte, both New York teams.
I think the Red Bulls might fall to like 6 or 7.
I mean, if New York City can't win a game, they're I don't know. I think they might be falling.
New York teams might be falling, but I think you could see Charlotte and Orlando passing that. Can Toronto get into a guaranteed spot?
Toronto make it interesting. Toronto make it very interesting. But I'm just saying for tonight's matchup, and I think for the final home playoff spot.
Tonight, by the way,
what'd you say?
Toronto has Columbus tonight.
Okay, never mind. Here we go. Toronto. That was great. It was great talking about you, boys. Let's finish up. Let's talk about the Hell is Real game. And the reason why we're not really going to talk much about it, because it was a fine game. It was a 0-0 draw. Nothing crazy happened.
Well, the implications were big, but they're not big when it's a 0-0 draw. I think they're still kind of big because Columbus does have that game in hand, which is against, I guess Cincinnati plays tonight also. But they're 2 points down with the game in hand. So essentially, if they can win out, they will finish ahead of Cincinnati. So not losing in that was pretty big for Columbus. But
look, some people were saying that this was a huge result for Cincinnati, and I understand the argument why that Miles Robinson and Ian Murphy were both suspended. So it was a back three of Alvis Powell.
Columbus scoreless.
No, but that's what I'm saying is you have 2 fullbacks playing center back with the Wazium, who is less than a cup of coffee in Major League Soccer played. They held Columbus Crew scoreless, and that is a big time defensive result. But I think the offensive woes for Cincinnati are scaring me a little bit. In 3 games since League's Cup, Cincinnati's only scored four goals. All 4 of them were against Montreal, where Columbus and Miami held them scoreless. Is it against really good teams? Cincinnati can't score. If that's the case, Cincinnati's not making its MLS Cup. But on the flip side, defensively, that's where this team thrives. And it's tough. This game, I think, left me with more questions than answers of how I feel about both of these teams. I think Columbus now, the rough loss to Seattle with the whole goalkeeper situation and now this draw, I'm like, are they starting to, kind of have tired legs underneath them? I don't know. It's an interesting situation that I think similar to the Messi for MVP conversation. We'll get some more answers in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but I'm starting to have my questions around the state of Ohio.
I am less worried, I guess.
That's fine.
I think it's 2 very good teams going up against each other. It ends in a 0-0 draw, very uneventful. I think when you look at it from, if I'm Columbus, I'm coming out of this game feeling probably pretty good. Like, as much as not scoring against a depleted Cincinnati side is bad, I also think they're playing for trophies here. And I think given the fact that they have a game in hand, that they can still finish ahead of them, I think it's all about placement going down into the season. I don't know. I don't like. I'm not gonna doubt Wilfred Nancy in Columbus. I also think what Cincinnati's been doing and continues to do with whoever is going to be starting for them from week to week is impressive. Are there concerns? Yeah, but am I more concerned about probably 28 other teams? Yeah.
Fair. Yes, I still think Cincinnati are in that class above most others, but when we're talking about that class, I'm concerned with them.
I think there's 4 or 5 teams in that class, and yeah, I guess when you talk about it like that, it's tough. But you're gonna whoever avoids the like one of these teams is going to avoid the other, at least one of the other two, right?
Yeah.
Between Miami, Cincy, and Columbus, and that's I don't know how that's going to play out, but that's a spot you want to be in because you want to depleted. One side of that bracket's going to be way different.
I think it's all about whoever can finish second in the East,
Yeah.
to be perfectly honest. It's who can eventually, potentially, if we're looking at lower seeds and how that all plays out, who can potentially avoid Miami. I think that's what that comes down to in the Eastern Conference. But that's why the East is fun. The East is a lot more fun than the West.
Miami avoid both of them technically? If right? If you think 1 versus 8, 2 versus
7, 3, 6, 4, 5.
And then the 4 or 5 winner would play 1-8.
Oh, true. So you want to finish? I don't know what
it almost doesn't matter. I think we're gonna get Hell is Real in the playoffs.
That's it. I want El Trafico on one side. I want Hell is Real on the other. That's it. That's all I want.
On one side and 2 go to MLS Cup is very, very.
Give me those as conference finals. That's what I need in my life.
I don't think we're gonna get Hell is Real in a conference final. I don't think it's possible unless one of them falls even more.
Yeah, maybe Cincinnati drops the 4, Orlando's miraculous rise. I don't fucking know.
And then you would have to beat Inter Miami.
Exactly.
Whatever. We're getting off topic.
All right, let's talk about a team that we won't have to worry about in a conference final. In the last point of the day, San Jose Earthquakes. They lose to the Vancouver Whitecaps 2. I'm taking shots. That's it.
Yeah, I'm a San Jose hater.
The Quakes lose to the Whitecaps 2-0 this past weekend, and with that loss, they are officially the first team eliminated from the 2024 MLS Cup playoffs. Jason, you don't have to have anything. You can. It's fine. But this is my own little rambling point that I was thinking about for the Quakes. If I am a San Jose Earthquakes fan, we have no manager. We have no chance of making the playoffs now officially. Just play the kids. This team has one of the best, young talent pools in all of the country, in all of Major League Soccer, and they've barely played their homegrowns and their academy kids and everything all season long. Give me Hernan Lopez, Nico Tazares, Cruz Medina, Emi Ochoa, Oscar Verhoeven, Jamar Ricketts, Daniel Mooney. Just start them. Let these kids just get minutes, and if you get blown out 7-1 7-0 every single game, whatever, who gives a shit? You're getting these kids an opportunity, and whatever new manager comes in or front office leadership that comes in or whatever can take a look and be like, oh, Emi Ochoa, maybe we should start the stud 18-year-old goalkeeper prospect that's been the best goalkeeper prospect in the last decade. Maybe we should start Cruz Medina, who is a highly touted youth international that the U.S. and Mexico both want the nationality or whatever, the nationality rights to at the end of the day, right? Just play these kids, get them opportunities to eat up MLS minutes, and just give them a chance to shine and show what San Jose has, because you have nothing else, period.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. They've lost 21 times, 65 goals allowed, minus 31 goal differential. They're not competing, so
they haven't broke 20 points on the season.
You're 100% right. That is ridiculous.
I'm so angry about this.
Oh man, that is ridiculous. But still, I couldn't agree more. I think what's the point, right? Obviously the ones you're playing now aren't getting it done. So at least try something else.
It's trade away Jackson Ewell, or I think he might even be a free agent this offseason. Move on from him. Get rid of Carlos Gruezo. Like, Jeremy Abobasi.
Not great.
I'm just going for a full roster reset here. Like, the only player that this team really should be keeping from this roster is Hernan Lopez, their new young DP attacking midfielder who looks great, and Christian Espinoza. Outside of that, I'm okay, and obviously all the homegrown talents that I named. But outside of that, like, wipe the roster. I'm fine with it. If I was San Jose's fan base, if I was part of that, I'd be fine with it. But that's where I'm going to leave this episode. Jason, is there any other game you want to mention? I know you've mentioned 2 or 3 games.
Well, I guess I'll mention for the weekend because I feel like I've only mentioned games for tonight.
Give me your weekend game. I like that.
I think Columbus versus Orlando. I think Orlando coming off of tonight with Charlotte and then going to Columbus. I think they're going to Columbus. But that's a tough 2 games and a very important 3 to 6 points that they can pick up. So that will be huge for them, especially because Charlotte has New England that on the weekend, which let's just pencil in a win there. Is it a wow? Is it?
I think so.
Vancouver versus Galaxy, maybe. I don't know. There's a couple other interesting ones, but I would probably put Orlando as the top one.
I'll just throw in, I think this is a very interesting, next few days for Real Salt Lake. They host Dallas, then they host Portland. These are 2, Portland and Dallas are teams fighting for their playoff play-in game lives and RSL's
They're fighting for their playoff.
Exactly.
Playoff spot,
so I think this is going to be an interesting week to see what RSL shapes up like. Jason, next week's going to be a fun podcast. We're going to have about 2 games each for these clubs to really prove to us what they're worth and where they're going to be, and if Messi's an MVP candidate. So other than that, Jason, thank you, listeners, watchers. Thank you, guys. Follow us on social media. Follow us on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and everything like that. Leave us a review. I've been pushing that lately. That's just my own thing. So if you haven't, please do that. It's highly appreciated on both of our ends.
5 stars only.
5 stars only.
No,
please,
be genuine. We like the feedback.
If you want to give a 1 star, I respect your opinion, but just don't post it maybe. But other than that, I'll take
that to us.
Just tell me I suck in DMs. That's fine. But other than that, we appreciate it. Jason, thank you again. We'll catch you all next week.